God, but there will be someone there to help you. In order to serve God, the Hebrew people have to wait for God in their lives. Now, I don't know about you, but I can get kind of impatient sometimes, especially with my cell phone. Like, I expect it to be really quick. And like, the minute that it doesn't respond to my touch, like if I'm in my email and I want to go to the home screen and I press the home button, I just want it to go there right away. You know, sometimes it stalls or just doesn't respond. I hate that. I always like poke it and I growl at it. And if my husband Chali is around, he always is just like, Jill, just be patient. You know, just wait, hold on. I can't. It needs to go to the home screen now. So knowing that about myself, you know, I'm a little bit hesitant to tell you that we still have to wait for God. That hasn't changed. Even with all of the advances in technology, we haven't yet figured out a way to instant message God. We haven't yet figured out a way to press a button and to see some immediate God action in our lives. We have to wait. We have to wait. Just looking at the story of the Hebrew people reminds us that learning to wait for God is part of serving God. There is, however, an important distinguishing mark between us and the Hebrew people. And that is that we aren't just waiting for other people to speak to us on behalf of God. You see, it's not solely my job to hear God's words and then tell you. I'm not the only Moses, so to speak, among us. And the reason that it's different is because at the time of Moses, he was the prophet the Hebrew people needed. It was like God tried to talk to all of them, and it just didn't work. And so God appoints Joshua as the next leader, and then there was another leader, and another leader, and another leader. Right? But then something happened that was unique. And that was that God became one of us. God dwelt with us in the person of Jesus Christ. And Jesus is certainly also a prophet who speaks to the people on behalf of God. But here's the thing. Jesus doesn't want the people to be dependent on an intermediary in order to listen to God. And during his own ministry, we can see this because of the way that he teaches his disciples to listen to God, to speak God's messages themselves. He teaches them how to perform miracles, and he sends them out, and he says, go try that. See if it works, right? He teaches them how to offer healing in people's lives. He teaches them how to share food with the hungry. He says, I'm not here to do it all or to tell you everything. You have to figure out how to get in connection with God yourself. And in this way, he's a prophet teacher because he's teaching the disciples, but he's also teaching us how to listen to God, how to speak God's messages. And the truth is, learning to listen to God requires that we learn to wait. Because there will be times when we won't hear anything. We won't hear anything. We won't hear God speaking to us. And we have to wait. Learning to speak God's messages also requires that we learn to wait. Because it's important that the message that we end up speaking is actually and truly from God. So I think the question for us today might be how. How do we wait? How do we cultivate that spirit of waiting in a culture that is so anti-waiting? And maybe the first step is just to admit that we don't like waiting. That we get impatient. It's hard to wait on God. And sometimes that self-awareness, every time Chali looks at me and says, Joe, resume its proper functioning. And it usually does. So sometimes that self-awareness can give us that patience that we need to wait on God. And next we have to listen. We have to listen and listen and listen again. Because we can't always expect to hear from God on our timetable when we want to hear from God. But we also can't expect to hear from God when we haven't been practicing, when we haven't been tuning our ears to hear God's voice. And that's where a tool like centering prayer, which we talked about a few weeks ago, can come in handy because it gives us a method for how to listen. It's a lifelong process. Listen, listen, listen. But then, imagine this, we actually receive a message from God. We receive a message from God, and then it's important to wait again. Because how many of us have seen those false prophets that Moses warns against? I mean, I've seen a lot on college campuses, for example, like the speaker circle. They go in there and they say whatever they want, and you're really starting to think, yeah, you are just saying whatever you want. It doesn't have anything to do with God. But they think it does, right? Or we've probably seen some on TV, right? I mean, some of those channels, they make me mad. I can't watch them. They make me feel impatient. It's sometimes too easy for us to disillusion ourselves and just to be sure that we have a message from God and we rush out to tell the world or condemn the world. And it's not true. It's false. We've disillusioned ourselves. And in our world, there are many people who claim that they speak or they act on behalf of God. There are many people who claim to speak or act on behalf of God. And the truth is, it seems that many of them are pretty far off the mark. They're just not really in line with who God is. And so this is where it comes to be important that as you wait to speak or act upon what you've heard from God, you have to take the time to reflect on that message from God. Does it match who you know God to be? Does it reveal a God who is loving, who is compassionate? As you search the scriptures, do the scriptures confirm the message? You could try telling someone, a trusted friend or a spiritual mentor, to kind of test the message, so to speak, to make sure that it's really a message from God. And then in the midst of that journey of waiting, you take a cue, so to speak, from the Hebrew people. Not all cues from the Hebrew people, though, because remember, they did a lot of things they weren't supposed to, right? But take a cue from their journey of waiting. Because it might take us 40